When it comes to elections, I suppose I'm a realist, or perhaps a bit of a defeatist. The Labor Party, led by Anthony Albanese, won and remains in office as Prime Minister. That's simply the reality. Congratulations where congratulations are due. I know this may not be the news many of you hoped for, but I'm not here to dwell on frustrations or criticise anyone. Australians made their choice, and that choice defines the direction of our country. A couple of expressions come to mind, two sides of the same coin. Vox populi, vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God. In other words, the will of the people is the ultimate authority in a democracy, and whether we like the outcome or not, it represents the collective choice of the population. On the flip side, philosopher Joseph de Maistre famously said, "Every nation gets the government it deserves." This suggests that a country's leadership reflects the values, decisions, and actions of its people, whether for better or worse. It's a reminder that Australians, through our votes or lack of engagement, shape our own political fate. I've only got a few things to say about this election result. First, while this was considered a landslide victory for Labor, geographically speaking, regional Australia remains largely conservative, with the Liberals and Nationals dominating in many areas, clearly marked in blue on the map. These regions are home to some of Australia's biggest industries, farming, agriculture and mining, which have long been conservative strongholds. By the way, the division of Kennedy in northern Queensland, one of Australia's largest electoral divisions, is held by Katter's Australian Party, which is also considered a conservative-leaning party. There are only a couple of exceptions to this regional conservative trend, one being the sparsely populated Northern Territory, home to the largest percentage of Aboriginal Australians at around 30%. Interestingly, Victoria, often considered one of Australia's most progressive states, leading the way in Indigenous rights, has the lowest proportion of Aboriginal people at just 0.9%. Funny that. At the federal level, the Northern Territory overwhelmingly supports Labor, while the coalition focused on law and order policies, aiming to keep serious offenders off the streets. Labor took a softer approach, offering significant funding increases for bush education, housing and remote community development. In the end, promises of increased government support proved particularly popular in the Northern Territory. The other exception is Tasmania, which in this election strongly favoured Labor, leaving the Liberals without a single seat. Look, I don't claim to be a political expert, and there are a myriad of factors that influenced how Tasmanians voted, but generally speaking, Tasmanians are known for their strong environmental focus, and they don't seem to have much enthusiasm for Peter Dutton, so I suppose it's not too surprising that the results turned out this way. However, despite regional Australia being home to large agricultural and mining industries and traditionally leaning conservative, that's not where the bulk of the Australian population resides. Labor won this election in the densely populated cities, where a large percentage of residents are born overseas, the LGBT community flourishes, and multicultural festivals are commonplace. Realistically, Australian elections are won in the city. It's hard to imagine Peter Dutton walking in a pride parade. I suspect he'd sooner lose an election than do so. Unfortunately for the Liberal Party, urban voters aren't always aware of the challenges faced in regional Australia. As long as they have access to their soy lattes and diverse cuisines, life feels comfortable. They don't necessarily think about where their soybeans come from, and they tend to favour the left in politics. Caught in their inner city bubble, they are often disconnected from rural or working class realities. Of course, the Prime Minister has pledged to spend taxpayer money on increased government support, something many voters seem to favour. However, his promise of 5% deposits for all first home buyers is likely to drive house prices even higher, making home ownership increasingly out of reach for regular Australians. Independent economist Saul Eslake put it simply, anything that allows people to pay less for a mortgage, which this policy will do, will result in people borrowing more money, and that will in turn result in pushing prices up. While the policy aims to make housing more accessible, its long-term impact on affordability remains a point of contention. These are the latest results, noting that they aren't final. 16 seats are still in doubt. However, one thing is clear, and some of you may be pleased to hear it: the Greens have lost some seats. How many? That's still uncertain. While more people voted for Labor than the coalition, it has also come at the expense of the Greens. Their transition from an environmental advocacy party to a more radical movement hasn't resonated well with voters. For example, Avery Howard was the Greens candidate for Fowler. According to his profile on X, he describes himself as a queer, anti-poverty advocate who lives on Cabrogal land. Reports indicate that I think he identifies as non-binary, was subjected to homophobic and transphobic online abuse during the campaign. Either way, the voting public weren't prepared to elect a bearded, purple-haired, non-binary person. I'm not sure why. The Muslim vote didn't make any dents in Labor strongholds, as some were hoping. Their how-to-vote cards actually placed the Greens ahead of Labor, followed by the Liberal Party. Yes, the Muslim vote was preferencing the Greens. I'm not here to explain it, just reporting the facts. According to the ABC last week, the Muslim vote urges Parramatta constituents to preference Liberals over Labor due to justice on Gaza. In that seat, they asked their supporters to vote 1 for the Greens. It's an unusual political dynamic in Australia that sees the Muslim voting bloc preferencing the Greens, though they did clarify that this is not an endorsement of the Liberal Party nor of the Greens. Instead, it was described as a calculated and strategic manoeuvre. None of it mattered in the end. Labor triumphed in all those seats. Thanks to a viewer for pointing this out. There is ongoing debate within the Muslim community about whether voting in a democratic system is even valid. One website argues, the democratic system is contrary to Islam, and approving of it or participating in it implies apostasy and being beyond the pale of Islam. I'm not a scholar of Islam, but it's worth noting that this is a point of contention within the community. Peter Dutton has made history, but not in the way he hoped. He has lost the seat he held for more than 2 decades, along with his party leadership. Who will be the next Liberal leader? Time will tell. However, there are reports that the party is considering introducing a gender quota system, with the Sydney Morning Herald reporting demands for quotas as 3 post-Dutton leadership options firm. Pauline Hanson's One Nation party is reportedly pleased with its results, with headlines reading, "Not by chance, Pauline Hanson hails big results for One Nation." According to the latest count, the party has recorded a 1.3% swing. While One Nation failed to secure lower house seats, it remains hopeful about increasing its representation in the Senate. Billionaire Clive Palmer's Trumpet of Patriots party has failed to make any inroads despite its massive budget, with reports suggesting that Mr. Palmer is bowing out of politics, citing that he is too old. Anyway, that's my take on the recent election. With Albanese back in power, I have no doubt I'll have plenty of material to work with for these videos over the next 3 years.